This video is going to apply to Infiniti QX56 QX80 from 2011 to 2024 and Nissan Armada from 2017 to 2024. And we are going to inspect the intake valves. And I know that the intake valves are going to be disgusting because this is a gasoline direct injection vehicle, which means that the back of the intake valves do not get cleaned by fuel, by gasoline, like they would on an engine without direct injection. So direct injection vehicles are a pain in the butt because of that. You get all this buildup on the intake valves, and over time you lose power, and eventually you'll get a misfire code. I haven't gotten that yet. It's not to that point. I did clean these intake valves 55,000 miles ago. At 100,000 miles, we're at 155, 160-ish thousand miles now. So I'm gonna clean them again. You can see here, I have a catch can in here, which a lot of people say that it will stop your intake valves from getting dirty. It'll catch all of the vaporized oil that's going through the intake manifold in here. And this is a high quality catch can, not like a cheap eBay one, like a $20 one. This is JLT. And we will take a look at that. We will talk about that later on. All right, I'm gonna come over here, loosen this 10 millimeter nut over here, and I'm going to disconnect the negative cable. Let's remove the airbox all the way up to the throttle body. I'm going to start by disconnecting this wire harness here. And then that wire harness comes down here and connects to the airbox. I'm just going to disconnect it from the airbox with a pry tool. Next, we've got 3 10 millimeter bolts. One here, one there, and one down there. 8 millimeter worm drive hose clamp right there. You can loosen that hose. And then all we need to do now is remove any kind of hoses and electrical connections that are attaching to the airbox. So we'll start by squeezing these clamps on this clamp, squeezing these ears on this clamp, sliding it backwards. Then we'll be able to pull this PCV hose off of here. Looks like we'll take off this one as well, and we'll unplug this wiring harness right there. So let's start with those. Okay, so there's that hose off, and I just pulled it out of this little holder here. Pulled that hose off. Now let's come around to this side. You've got your, let me turn on another light. You've got this hose coming up from the front diff. This is the front diff breather. It's really nice how Nissan runs it so high. So like if you ever did do a water crossing, all you gotta do is squeeze that little piece of plastic in there, that retainer, that clip, with some needle nose pliers, and push it out of its holder on the airbox. And then you've got this hose right here to disconnect from this metal pipe. Then on the back of this box, you've got another hose right here, air hose, to disconnect. Okay, so now you can pull back on this accordion hose, and you can lift everything out of place. Now, because I have this catch can, this is gonna look a little differently, this hose routing, than your vehicle probably, but it's gonna be very similar. You can see I've got this PCV hose coming up over the intake manifold. So I need to get that out of the way. So I'm just gonna disconnect the hose clamps right here and take it off of the PCV valve on the driver's side of the engine. So while we're talking about the PCV hose, you have 2 PCV valves, one on the driver's side, one on the passenger side of the engine. If your vehicle has over like 100,000 miles or more and these have never been changed, I would recommend at least taking them out and inspecting them. You want to be able to shake it back and forth and hear the valve in there. It's like a little check ball rattling around. If it doesn't do anything, it's because it's clogged up with oil. And you can try cleaning it with like some carb cleaner or brake cleaner, or you can just buy a new one. You know, maybe every 100,000 miles, replace the 2 PCV valves. I did this one 55,000 miles ago, so I'm really not that worried about it. I'll link to these in the description. I'll link to everything in the description so you don't have to sit here and memorize or write down part numbers. And also, by the way, if you're gonna take this out, it requires a 23 millimeter wrench, which is kind of a weird size. Not every toolkit has a 23 millimeter. And then on the driver's side of the engine, the PCV is behind this wiring harness right here where this air hose comes into, right behind this wiring harness. There it is, right there. If the PCV valves get all gummed up, then more oil mist is getting inside of the intake manifold, which is just going to exacerbate the problem of the gunk and the carbon building up on the back of the intake valves. Okay, so I took the PCV valve out, shake it, I hear nothing. Barely, nothing. So we got to clean this out or replace it. Okay, let's clean this thing out. You could use carb cleaner, brake cleaner, throttle body cleaner, any kind of solvent basically. Shake it around. There, can you hear that ball down there? So there we go. We're starting to free it up. You can see this check valve moves freely now, not all gunked up. You can see I can push on it. It springs back into a position when I let it go. That's what you want. When you're reinstalling the PCV valves, don't go crazy with the torque. Just get them snug because you're going into plastic, so you don't want to risk cracking anything. I've got a 10mm bolt that I use to hold on my catch cam, but that won't apply to you. But you just want to check around and see if you have any PCV hoses that are going to be in your way connecting to the manifold, that when you want to pull the manifold off, it's going to hang everything up. So just disconnect those. So I've got this one disconnected, and you can see I've got a hose running over here, and it comes to that one. So I got to disconnect that one. You can see I've got all those PCV hoses just tucked off to the side there. And now, you know, if you're not cleaning your intake valves, you want to be careful that when you remove this intake manifold, no dirt is going to fall down into the cylinder. So maybe before starting all this, I should have said, maybe give your engine a wash. There's really no big secret to cleaning an engine. The thing that I do to avoid any problems, you see any kind of electrical connector, I cover it up with aluminum foil. I just take a little piece of aluminum foil, cover up every electrical connector, spray on degreaser, and then I use a garden hose, but I don't use it on jet. I just use it on shower. A low pressure setting, clean everything off. You can hit it with a bristle brush. If dirt's not coming off, you just need more degreaser, a bristle brush, and do it again. I much prefer to clean an engine that way than with a pressure washer or even a garden hose set to like the jet setting. You can risk getting water in places where water's not supposed to go. So I take, you know, it doesn't take long, an extra minute, cover up everything with aluminum foil, and then just not hardcore pressure on the hose, and you will avoid any kind of problem. So maybe clean up all around down here where the intake manifold is going to separate. Just get as much loose dust and dirt out of there. Now, we do need to make a decision on the throttle body. There's a couple different ways you could go about this. You could leave the throttle body attached to the intake manifold. The downside with that is that you're going to need to disconnect these two coolant hose connections down here, which means you're going to lose some coolant dripping out. So you need to have a pan down below. Alternatively, what you could do is remove these 4 bolts from the face of the throttle body, and it'll unbolt from the intake manifold, and you can just leave it hanging down here, and then you won't need to mess with that. The downside with that is that you need to most likely get a new throttle body gasket for this connection right here. Since I'm going to be working on the cooling system anyways, I'm going to go with the option to undo those 2 hoses because I don't have a replacement gasket on hand for the throttle body. So now I've got a towel under here. I'm going to go ahead and take off these hose clamps and remove these 2 coolant hoses from the throttle body. Okay, a little bit of coolant came out, not much at all. And we got to disconnect this wire harness to the throttle body. Now, I know you're going to be tempted to clean your throttle body, and that's great. You should do that with some throttle body cleaner. Just spray it around in there. But modern vehicles, a lot of them, if you manually move the throttle plate, like if you open it up with your fingers to clean further in, it can kind of mess things up. It can actually ruin the throttle bodies. I don't know if that's the case with this vehicle, so I would just avoid that. I would just spray on the outside. You'll get a little bit. If you happen to have chosen the other option of disconnecting the throttle body, then you could spray it from the inside. But on a lot of modern cars, there's like gears in here, and if they're not actuated electronically, they can strip out. So now with that, we are ready to remove the intake manifold. The only thing we have left are the 10 bolts holding the manifold down. So if you come and peek in here, these silver bolts, there's one right there, there's one right there, there's one right there, one there, and one at the very back. So the driver's side, they're all easy to get to. On the passenger side, the very back one is going to be the most challenging, so I'd recommend you start with that one. Yeah, so there's a ton of stuff in the way to get to that back bolt. Now the key to getting that one out is getting all of this stuff out of your way. We do not need to remove these heater hoses, but we need to be able just to kind of flex them, move them out of our way. So same with all of this wiring. So what you can do is disconnect the connections that this wiring harness is attached to so that it has more movement in it. So you can disconnect that 10mm bolt. There is a probably a wire clip right here to this bracket. I already cut mine and now it's been replaced by a zip tie, so I'm going to remove that. You've got this band on the heater hoses. You can unclip that. You just need to get a flat screwdriver in here where it clips together, and that'll give you some more flexibility. You've got another one right there. You just get a flathead screwdriver in there to pop this band. That'll allow your heater hoses to be pushed back out of the way when you're trying to get to that bolt. You've got a bolt right there that holds this bracket on. If it's still in your way, you can remove the bracket entirely. And then this main wiring harness, you can see here, if you peel this boot back, it's attached right here with this clip. All you have to do is get a little flathead screwdriver, push in right there, and there's like a plastic tab on the inside, and that will depress that and allow you to pull the wire harness off of its mount. Having a little flathead screwdriver like this one's made by Steel, the chainsaw company. This is my favorite tool. I'll link to this, of course. I use this thing nonstop. I've talked about it in so many videos, but I mean, you can see it comes in so handy for so many things, whether it's separating clips like that, wire harnesses. I use it as a scraper. I use it for everything. And also, by the way, if you're fighting with any of these PCV hoses, anything not coming off, remember a lot of them are on like plastic type of nipples, and you don't just want to yank on them, you want to twist. And if it's still not coming off, you can take some silicone spray it in there, and then that will, with some twisting, that'll help it come out. Okay, so I started at the front, disconnecting things up here, moved my way towards the back, got all these clamps off, took out the bracket from the intake manifold, and now you can see that you can pull back on this wiring harness to get to that very last bolt right. Can you kind of see it right there? Now you can pull that back and you have access to that bolt. What you can do is you can even have a buddy hold these back, or you can jam something up against them to keep them back. But this is the way to do it. You will struggle and fight. I've done it. If you don't just kind of disconnect these things to have access to that back bolt. So now you're gonna have to play with your extensions, wobble sockets, make it easier. You can see I've got a deep wall 10mm wobble extension to my ratchet to get back there. And you do have to push back on these electrical harnesses and hoses, just push them back to get your socket down on there. And then as you're getting ready to finish taking that bolt out, it would be real easy for it to fall out and drop back behind the engine. So I've got my telescoping magnetic pickup tool attached to that bolt right there for when it comes out. I'm just gonna lift this up and try pulling it forward. Yeah, there's definitely something attached back there. So now that I pulled the intake manifold forward a little bit, you'll see that there's this wire harness that you can reach back here and just feel around for the clip to undo it, but that's it. Now you just want to lift up on this as you pull it out so you're not dragging the gaskets up against anything. You can see here, each cylinder has its own rubber gasket. I'm going to be replacing these, even though these don't seem too brittle. I'm going to be replacing them. We sell a full set of 8 over at lusooverland.com. And go ahead, take a look inside all these openings in your intake manifold. If it looks disgusting, if it looks like there's a lot of caked on oil residue, then you can disconnect. If that was the case, then I would disconnect the throttle body, disconnect any electronics from this, and you can give this thing a bath. It's just plastic. Hose it out or get some degreaser in there. There's a dryer brush, I think is what it's made for, cleaning the back of the dryer lint hose, like the hose that goes out the back of the dryer for the exhaust. And that works really well for this. That's what I used last time. Okay, so now that that is off, we have access to our intake valves. If you want to clean your intake valves, now's the time. You're right there. The other thing is, there's the starter. So a lot of people complain like, oh, it's so annoying that engineers put the starter in the valley of the engine. But honestly, it sounds worse than it is on this vehicle. On this vehicle, like, what does it take, an hour to get this stuff off, to get to that? It's not a big deal. But there is your starter if you needed to replace that. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna look inside of these intake ports, and we're gonna take a look and see how much carbon buildup is on the back of those intake valves. All right, as you can see, those valves are growing life on them. They are not shiny and clean like they were when I cleaned them 55,000 miles ago. Look at that. Yeah, disgusting. So that valve is not going to be able to raise up enough, and it's going to start causing problems. It's not going to be able to intake enough air when that valve tries to raise up and it's got all of that carbon growing on the stem. And so now all that's left to do is clean the intake valves. Now, last time I did this the old-fashioned way with hardcore solvents like Techron fuel system cleaner and B12 Chem Tool fuel system cleaner. I just poured that down into the wells with the intake valves, let it sit, and then scrubbed it with like a brass brush, and then sent patches down there and get all that carbon out of there. It was a lot like cleaning a rifle. Just scrub with a brush, then patches, and rinse and repeat over and over and over. And that sucked. It took forever. And so this time I decided that's not the way I'm gonna do it. And on Amazon Prime Day, I went and got this thing. It's a Walnut blaster. So instead of sandblasting, because that would do too much damage to the surface of the metal, this is ground up walnut shells is what it's using for media. And so this is gonna suck them up, and it's going to shoot them out with this gun right here. And simultaneously, this is a vacuum, which is gonna vacuum them up, and then just kind of the whole process repeats itself. So it comes with, this is the Tool brand. I'll link to it with the exact model and everything. It was around $300 on Amazon Prime Day. I've never used it before. It's gonna be the first time, but it comes with like a bunch of adapters to fit different shapes on the intake, but I wanted one that would fit really nicely. And so I saw this on eBay. I think it was eBay, and the guy is 3D printing these, made specifically for this engine. So you can see when it comes time to clean this out, this thing fits in there like perfectly. And then that way, see, this shape is the same as the shape in the intake. And so that way you've got a connection here for your vacuum. There's also a hole right here to shoot the walnut shells through. I covered it up right now with tape. I'm gonna try shooting it through the built-in hole on the gun first to see how that goes. And then we can try shooting it through the one in the hole, see which one works better. Because there are 2 valves down in there. So you will need to be able to kind of move the nozzle on the gun a little bit. And as it comes through here, you're not really able to do that very much. So I probably will end up giving this a try and seeing how it goes. Oh, one other thing I should mention. You have to make sure that the valves are closed when you do this. You don't want all of that media going into the cylinder. And so what we've got here is a breaker bar that goes down onto the crank pulley. I believe it's a 19 millimeter. And so with this, you can turn this is a ratcheting breaker bar, which makes it a lot easier. So you don't always have to reset it on the pulley. You're always gonna wanna turn this clockwise to the right and to turn the engine over, and you can watch the valves from up top here inside the intake chambers. You can watch them raise and lower, and you want to make sure that they're all the way seated down before you spray in there with the walnuts. All right, I've been trying some different things here. The first things I tried was shooting through the back of the provided suction tube with the adapter that I bought, 3D printed one, taped over, and that worked okay. And then what I did is I tried covering up the hole in the suction gun with tape and shooting through the small hole, that is what that's meant for, on the 3D printed adapter, and that worked okay. And then what I switched to, which I think I like the best so far, is going with this round, this oval adapter that the Walnut blaster came with. It fits down into the cylinder pretty well, and then I just hook the gun in through there, and the suction tube hooks on like that, and that worked really good. It gives me a really wide range of motion to get both valves. So I think I like this the best. I'm gonna try it out on the other cylinders and maybe switch back and forth, but let me get you in here. See if I can get you focused. Look at that. Look how beautiful those look now. Those look great. Compared to, let's look at a different one that I haven't cleaned yet. Look at all that buildup. You can see I got some media on there because I had this open, and so there was a little bit of splatter that was coming out and fell in there, no big deal, but you can see how dirty they were before. Look at all that buildup on that stem. I have cleaned the first 4 cylinders, the 4 closest to the front of the engine. And let's see, some observations. I really don't know actually what I prefer. I was using just this one adapter for a while, and then I switched back to the 3D printed one. They all work, so I don't really have any great insight there. Some pointers, some tips, some things that I have kind of learned. It still is useful to go down in there with a long screwdriver and scrape up and kind of take some of that carbon down from the walls, because while the Walnut blaster does a good job of getting down and hitting the bottom of the valves along that's higher up, it doesn't quite get on the walls or higher up on the stem as well. And in fact, what I did is like a final clean is I'll take like a little piece of fabric, wrap it around this brass brush, and then I'll kind of go down in there and swab the walls just to make sure I'm getting more of that carbon out of there. So that works really well. The other thing is you're gonna have to get real intimate with your vehicle because, you know, you're way high up. You're gonna have to get way back in there now. So I've got this like foam pad and I'm just like kneeling up here and leaning down into the engine bay. Look inside the Walnut blaster. You can see all the big chunks of carbon. See up the buildup right here, all the chunks of carbon that it's been pulling off the valves. Crazy. I'm probably going to change out the media right now. I've got, this thing actually came with 2 bags of Walnut media. I bought a carton not knowing that this tool came with 2 bags. So I used 1 bag and now I think I'm gonna use the second bag for the second batch of 4 cylinders. But this brings me to another point. You may get the urge to combine methods and pour solvents down into the cylinders to like get this stuff loosened up, but you don't want to do that because the media needs to stay dry. If it gets wet, it starts clumping up and it can actually start clogging in the gun. I actually did have a clog at one point and it kind of stopped cleaning and I was like, what is going on? It's not working very well. And it just had a clog, I think right up in here. And so I just kind of smacked this a few times and then it eventually unclogged. But you can watch the Walnut media through the clear hose getting sucked up. So you'll know if you have a clog. The other thing that's pretty cool, a little method, is after I spray the walnuts at the intake valves and do some cleaning, the next thing that I do is it's got this valve here so you can close whether or not walnut media is going through the gun, whether it's only compressed air or compressed air and media. And so you'll be spraying the walnuts out like this. And then what I'll do is I'll close it and I'll spray just compressed air to the bottom, right at the bottom of the valves. And that'll shoot all of the leftover media that's down in the bore. It'll just fling it up around and it'll get sucked up by the vacuum. That way, when you go to like inspect, it won't be full of walnut shells. I am done with the intake valve cleaning. That sucked. Let's see if I can get you a view of what it looks like now. Get out of here. There we go. Much better. So, you know, every single one of these has been walnut blasted. And then I went ahead and swabbed them as well and vacuumed them out, sprayed them with a lot of compressed air, get all the little remnants of any walnut shells out of there. So this is done. So what do I have to say? Well, having done both the old school way of solvent and brushes and now the walnut blasting, I can say that the walnut blasting is definitely better. Don't get me wrong, it still sucks, but this walnut blaster made the job definitely easier. I think the biggest limitation that I had was I didn't have my big air compressor with me. I just have this 6-gallon one. And so I would have to wait for it to kind of build up enough pressure. It needs to be at least 100 PSI when you're spraying it in there to knock the hardest deposits off. And so, yeah, I'd have to wait for it to build pressure. And so that kind of slowed me down. All in all, it took me about 3 hours to clean this. And a lot of that just has to do with the nature of the vehicle, like having to get way back in there. You know, it's not like you're working on some 4-cylinder sedan where you're just leaning over the engine. Like getting back to those cylinders in the rear is not the easiest thing in the world. So that's done. And now we can put the intake manifold back on. But ultimately, I think the lesson here is that direct injection sucks. Don't buy a direct injection vehicle if you can help it, because doing this every 50, 60,000 miles sucks, even with the walnut blaster. Don't get me wrong, it was better than just doing it the old-fashioned way, but it still sucks. And to know that it's just gonna come back
is so disheartening. So if possible, just avoid a direct injection vehicle. And I know that now, you know, the new thing out there is direct injection and port injection, with the idea of a little bit of port injection, get some fuel on the back of these intake valves, and that'll help keep them clean. But from what I've heard from guys who know a lot more than me that are more on the inside, it's not fixing the problem. They're still seeing issues with buildup on the intake valves. It's just delaying it. It's just making the service intervals longer, but it's not actually preventing it. Good old fashioned port injection. There's nothing wrong with it. It's the way to go. Yeah, you get 1% less fuel economy. So what if it solves you from doing this? Intake manifold time. You know, mine was not that dirty. I just swabbed the inside of each one of these passages, and that's all I got out on all 8. So not dirty at all. And this is something that the catch can should be keeping cleaner than without it. And the first time I cleaned this was at 100,000 miles. I'm at 150 now, and it was much dirtier at 100,000 miles, and that was pre-catch can. And if yours is really dirty, you know, this thing is just plastic. I think there's like, obviously you'll have to take the throttle body out, and I think there's an electrical sensor on the top. You can remove those. Then I washed this thing in like a giant tub with degreaser, and I got this really long brush. I'll see if I can find it and link to it in the description. And it worked really well because you could like send it down through this port, and then it would go way down in there. And anyways, but this time it's not bad at all. I just like swabbed on the inside and hardly got anything. But these gaskets here, I replaced them 50, 60,000 miles ago, and they're still pretty pliable, but I am going to go ahead and replace them. These rubber gaskets, they are pretty forgiving. If yours are original, I would recommend replacing them. But, you know, my point is, let's say you put this manifold back on with new gaskets, and then you find that like, oh, I forgot something, I need to take it off. That's okay. These gaskets are still going to be all right. It's not like some gaskets where they really are one-time use. Like once you torque them down and they get deformed to that setting and then you take them off, they may not seal again. These rubber ones are really forgiving in their design. So still super pliable after 50, 60,000 miles, but I am going to replace them because I got them. Don't forget to get these 2 hoses put back on, and now we're ready to throw the intake on. Just doing a final clean here, making sure I get all of the paper towels out of each intake hole and just cleaning everything off with some alcohol to make sure we have a nice mating surface for those gaskets. On goes the manifold, and the first thing you want to do is make sure that you get your wire harness in the back connected. And then you can start setting those bolts down to bolt the manifold down, in a telescoping magnetic tool like I'm using right there. Helps out a lot with that. I'm just getting them finger tight right now. More diagrams for you. As you can see, that intake manifold needs 73 inch-pounds on those bolts. And more importantly, there is a specific sequence that you want to follow for tightening them down. All right, gonna throw everything back together with the Airbox now. Just one thing I want to point out. This connector right here, you're not missing anything. Nothing connects to that. So don't dig all around trying to find out what in the world connects to that. Nothing connects to that. So ignore it. It'll drive you crazy if you're trying to find something. But now we're just going to basically have installation be the same as reverse. We're going to throw the Airbox back in. All right, I think everything's reconnected. Let's see what we got. So I need to mention that according to the factory service manual, anytime you unplug the throttle body or if you manipulate the throttle plate by hand, you need to do a relearn. It's super simple. It just involves, starting the engine, letting it warm up to temp, and then turning off the car and letting it be off for at least 10 seconds. It's that simple. But so before you start revving the engine or going on a drive, you just want to make sure to do this.